Okay, now we're live and recording, so we are ready to call the meeting to order when y'all are.
Okay, that's me.
Yes.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Is there something on here that I need to read verbatim?
No, just on item 1. You can read that.
I may not have the same thing in front of me. I have this in front. Can y'all see this?
Yes. So number 1, just call to order.
Okay, just call to order. We do have a quorum.
And if you'll read item 2, special instructions.
All right, special instructions. All members of the council and staff should begin speaking by stating their full name and their SMD position or role within the city.
And item 3.
And item 3, public comment. At this time, committee members may ask staff members questions regarding public comment submitted via email.
And on that note, there were none. We received no public comment. Due to the rules of a virtual meeting, we did make public comment available by submitting to me via email with a deadline of noon yesterday, and none were received.
Okay, thank you. Item number 4, consent agenda. Consider approving the August 27, 2020 Animal Shelter Advisory Committee regular meeting minutes.
And if it's okay with the committee, we'll take all of consent agenda together unless y'all want to speak to any specific item.
I'm okay with that.
I'm fine with that too.
I'm fine with it.
Is that a motion?
I motion
to approve.
I second.
Is that me again?
Yes. If you want to ask who's in favor.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Item B, consider accepting report of positive rabies specimens.
I'm sorry, Kara, that was approved as part of the overall consent agenda.
Okay. All right, so move on to item 5 then.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Regular agenda, discussion and possible action related to the monthly shelter numbers for June of 2020.
Okay, and I will share my screen now. I believe you all should be able to see the PowerPoint presentation that I've prepared. And if it's agreeable to the committee, I think the real meat of this is when we get into the overall yearly performance. So I will speak to the monthly numbers pretty quickly, unless of course there's any questions. So for June 2020, we did have an extraordinarily high month of new arrivals. We had 598 animals arrive at the shelter during the month of June 2020. As some of y'all are aware and have seen in the news cycle, this was largely driven by one single cruelty case where we seized 99 animals off a single property, the majority of which were fighting chickens. And so that's where you'll see that monthly activity. It was an all-in effort from animal services staff at all levels, every animal services officer, as well as shelter staff and supervisory staff were on scene to collect the animals after duly getting permission through the court system. And then those animals were also adopted out in the same month. That happened, we made the seizure early in June 2020, which means that we had the court hearing as well as the final assignment to animal services, as well as the adoption and transfer out of the majority of those animals all in the same month. So although intake was really high at 598 animals, we also had high adoptions and rescue transfers at 289. I believe 94 out of 99 of those animals had a live release. 5 of them unfortunately did die in custody because of their extreme emaciated state. We also had 156 animals redeemed by their owner, including any cats that were shelter neuter released and any wildlife. A total of 41 animals were euthanized. 23 citizens utilized the microchip clinic, and we had 413 animals left in the shelter at month end. And of course, we get uncomfortable anytime we have over 400 animals But that is important to note that none of that was the livestock, horses, fowl, et cetera, that was seized off the single property. So we're proud to report for June that 83.8% of animals were released alive.
Next on the agenda, discussion and possible action related to monthly shelter numbers for July 2020.
So July is always a really high intake month for us as well. You see that it is down compared to June 2020 with 352 new arrivals, 179 were adopted or rescue transferred, and 131 redeemed by owners. So some more normalized numbers there. 27 were euthanized, which is pretty close to one of our record lows. 16 citizens utilized the microchip clinic. And 389 animals left in shelter. So the first week of July, of course, with Independence Day, is one of our busiest weeks of the year as far as intake of animals. We did prepare as usual with setting up extra space for animals coming in. We were unsure how we would be impacted this Independence Day due to the restrictions due to COVID. And so, of course, there was not the July 4th Pops concert downtown. There was not the Lake Nasworthy fireworks display. And so we hoped that our intake would be down as well, since those loud noises are a lot of what drives our intake at the shelter. But that did not prove to be true, that absent any sanctioned fireworks displayed by any large groups, there still was a tremendous number of fireworks complaints going off with private citizens choosing to do that. And so there were still a number of animals that came in that week of July 4th. That was a really difficult intake week for us. We did hustle to turn around any animals we knew to be owned, did a lot of posting of all of the animals coming in as quickly as we could. And we did yield the month at a lower shelter population with 389 animals left in the building at the end of July due to the rescue transfer efforts, as well as those owner redemptions. So July performed well at 81.79% of animals released alive.
Okay, thank you. Discussion and possible action related to monthly shelter numbers for August of 2020.
So unfortunately, August is more of the same, still above 350 animals coming in, with 182 adopted and rescue transferred, 144 redeemed. We did see an increase in our number of animals euthanized, with 49 animals euthanized and 358 left in the shelter. So we did eke by with an 80.89% live release rate for August. The vast amount of that euthanasia was cats. So we had two residents bring in about 25 cats in 2 business days. I'm sorry. Yes, 25 cats in 2 business days. Those cats proved to be sick with a nearly fatal disease, calicivirus, and it caused an outbreak in our new arrival room. Although we vaccinate within 1 hour of arrival for all cats over 1 pound, for the first 72 hours of getting those vaccines, the animals are still vulnerable to the spread of disease. And so that is something that impacted us greatly and really did hurt us for August, having 38 of our cats euthanized, largely due to that disease outbreak when they were at end of life. We do offer supportive care for calicivirus. It is a virus, so it's a matter of offering supportive care and hoping the animal pulls through. But when those animals were suffering at end of life, we did have to make that decision on a number of animals in the month of August. And so we were sad to report that behavior or that performance, but still overall good things happening in August, bringing us to that 80.89% live release rate.
Okay, discussion and possible action related to monthly shelter numbers for September 2020.
So September, we also performed really well. We had 363 new arrivals, still seeing a lot of animals coming into the shelter. Sometimes in September, we start to see the slowdown from over the summer, and we still just had not gotten that relief yet. We did have 135 animals adopted or rescue transferred. I do think we exceeded 100 animals rescue transferred a number of these months that we're talking about. And so that's always something to brag about. Then 138 animals redeemed by owner, with 407 animals left in the shelter. And so September was really good. I think it tied for second place of one of our highest performing months, with 86.94% of animals released alive.
All right. Discussion and possible action related to annual shelter numbers for fiscal year 2019-20.
This is the big news to brag about. So this kind of gives us a macro view of all of the months' performance together, how that performed. And so, of course, we report on a fiscal year, which was October 1st, 2019 through September 30th, 2020. And so one of the things this is our first full year with partnering with American Pets Alive and using their methodology to get to no kill. And I think you'll recall that our goal for fiscal year 20 was 72% of animals released alive. And I'll cut to the chase. We exceeded that greatly. And so we got to 82.1% of animals released alive for fiscal year 20. And there were a lot of things that went into that. One of the things, and so I'll start at I'll get back to the top now that I've spoiled the end of it. So we had our new arrivals were at 4,560 animals. That we had hoped to bring that down. So fiscal year 19 intake was about 4,800 animals. So that's largely unchanged. We just had about a 6% decrease, that percent change from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 20. We had hoped to decrease that for a number of reasons. Number one, Pets Alive sets forth metrics of what you should be taking in regularly. A community our size should be taking in about 1,600 animals a year. We continue to far exceed that, almost 3 times that, at 4,500 animals taken into the city animal services during fiscal year 20. A large amount of that is cats, and getting our arms around that is important. A lot of that is stray dogs or unowned dogs, or animals reported to be stray and unowned. And we've got to get a handle on that as well. But then we also serve wildlife, which is unusual for a city animal shelter to provide services for, as well as livestock that usually does fall under the agriculture code with the county sheriff's department. So there are a number of things that we need to tackle coming into fiscal year 21, and we will be bringing those to the committee for consideration on how to get our intake further down. Certainly, we don't want to eschew our responsibility for caring for these animals, but we do want to share and report that we cannot save the animals in our facility when we are have an unmanaged intake of animals coming in. As I mentioned in August, when we had an unmanaged intake with 25 cats coming in from 2 separate households, and we couldn't plan for that or schedule for that, and the residents were unwilling to participate in, letting that come in slowly over time, that did cause a great disease outbreak in our facility. And if we are going to get to 90% in fiscal year 21, we will have to control some of that to be able to manage and appropriately care for the live outcome for animals already in our facility. I do also want to share that 592 animals were euthanized. A total of 825 animals died. And I am going to change that reporting going into fiscal year 21. Historically, we've reported what we euthanized, so what we took action to end the life of when an animal was at end of life or aggressive beyond rehab. But any animals that are deaths in custody, like neonatal kittens, is something we continue to struggle with. That does count against our live release rate. So we are going to expand our reporting going into fiscal year 21 to have a more complete picture reported to the committee. So that is a really big deal to report that under 1,000 animals died in our care last year. That's huge. More than double that died in our care the year before. And so that's the simple part of it. And that is how we got to the live release rate of 82. When we drill down into our number of animals euthanized, cats continue to be the ones that suffer and struggle. Of course, fiscal year 20 was our first full year also of having a robust shelter, neuter, and return program. whereby any community cats that were not relying on a human food source could be spay-neutered, rabies vaccinated, and returned to their original location or added to a colony like the one at the animal shelter. Even with that, we still faced the euthanasia of a number of cats. I believe the continued housing of neonatal kittens is the largest part of that. We did, of course, have the euthanasia of 153 dogs and 78 other. That would be any livestock or wildlife that were at end of life or part of a bite investigation. Broken down here. So of the 592 animals euthanized, 445 were due to sick, injured, or failure to thrive. 115 were aggressive or part of a bite quarantine, and 29 were feral because in the very beginning of fiscal year 20, we did not yet have our shelter neuter return program launched. And so there were a few cats that were healthy and uninjured that did lose their life before we could get that program up and going. And we did have one animal euthanized as owner requested. That is a service that we stopped early on in fiscal year 20. And so that did not count against us much. One item to note as we move forward in goal setting is to always measure ourselves against best practices set by American Pets Alive. The current best practices is they recommend 70% of your outcomes should be local adoptions. So citizens coming forward and adopting. We have room to grow there when we're at 23% of our outcomes for San Angelo for fiscal year 20 were adoptions. Return to owner best practices are 15%. For fiscal year 19, San Angelo exceeded that at 17%. But for fiscal year 20, we almost doubled that at 34% of our outcomes were returned to owner. And of course, that includes your traditional, hey, I lost my dog, oh, it's at the shelter, I came and got it, as well as any wildlife that were returned to field and any community cats that were returned to field. We also continue to exceed our goal on transfers out. And so that can be locally to foster care or to a large scale transport. Best practices says that you should plan for 10% of your outcomes leaving via transfer out. But we had 25% of our animals leave in that methodology. So we did have an increase there, I think from about 24% to 25%. And so best practices, they're recommending only 5% of your animals are outcome due to a death. And so this is based on a 95% live release rate, whereas we're sitting at 18% of our animals did end in a deceased outcome for fiscal year 20.
Consider approving standard operating procedure for returning community cats to the field.
So we were able to fund some amount of shelter neuter return for fiscal year 20. We had $20,000 that we had in a prior year salary savings that we captured and put into the live outcome for community cats. So we worked on an ad hoc policy with some one-time funding to do that, but we found that the policy needed to be built out even further and brought back to the committee for further consideration. And so this is the primary program that provides for the live release of our community cats. These can be feral cats. These can be domestic cats that are not dependent on a human food source, or domestic cats that are part of a neighborhood or colony where there is a caregiver providing for them. And so, as I mentioned, funding is limited. We're continuing this program into fiscal year 21 with donations only. We had no funding going into fiscal year 21. I have about $6,000 in donations right now to continue the program as best we can. We do not yet have a stable annual allocation identified. And so that leaves us in a situation where we need to make some judgment calls about how we're going to proceed with the program. We firmly believe that healthy, uninjured community cats should not be euthanized as they were done in the past with animal services. We do believe we need to provide for a live release of those animals, even if we can't afford to spay neuter them. And that is backed up by American Pets Alive, that they believe you should return to field, even if you can't spay neuter. We believe heavily in the rabies vaccination of feral cats, as a number of them do congregate alongside natural waterways where skunks and raccoons also accumulate. Also, if anybody's feeding them, if you put out cat food, you're also going to attract skunks and sometimes raccoons, which are high risk for rabies. And so we put forth kind of some tiers and some framework for how we would prioritize our services. Ideally, we would spay neuter every cat that we're returning to the field. We would rabies vaccinate every cat that we're returning to field. But absent sufficient funding, we would have to consider prioritizing which services we're going to provide. And so we would identify sufficient funding at having $18,000 to $20,000 budgeted for this program. And if we did have $18,000 to $20,000 budgeted each year for this program, we would spay neuter each cat and rabies vaccinate each cat. In the event we don't have that much funding available, if we had a lower tier available, that sufficient funding tier in your background is identified as $12,000 to $18,000 annually. So if we had less funds than that, if we had $8,000 to $12,000 annually, we would categorize that as having a moderate amount of funding. Under moderate funding, we would spay our female cats and we would rabies vaccinate all cats. So male cats that are returned to field would be returned unaltered, but with a rabies vaccine under moderate funding when we have to make those judgment calls and spend our money where it's best used. The next tier for the committee to consider is minimal funding. So minimal funding would be identified as having budget available of $3,000 to $8,000. At that point, we would rabies vaccinate everybody and spay neuter nobody. That would be the cost to provide that service. And then under insufficient funding, so anything under $3,000, we would rabies vaccinate till we're out of money, and anything else would be returned to field unaltered and not rabies vaccinated. That's something we take very seriously. It's not something that we're the most comfortable with, but it is something we have to consider in our uncertain financial future. As I mentioned, I hope it never gets to that point, is what I'm saying. But I thought it was important to spell out how dire the situation becomes when we do not have sufficient funding. Just to continue on with the policy, this is largely partnered with Austin Animal Center, who runs a robust shelter neuter return program as well, and is an American Pets Alive approved city. And so I worked closely with them on developing which animals should be returned to field. And so they said any cat that is feral, semi-feral, or domestic with a caretaker. We also would make sure that the animal is cleared of any medical concerns. So if the animal is injured or sick or becomes sick under our care, we would make sure that they get appropriate care before they are returned to field. And then, as I mentioned, spay neutered and rabies vaccinated if sufficient funding, and if the location of return is appropriate, and if the cat is a healthy weight. So if the cat comes in, is sickly, is underweight, we would not consider returning it to its original location. We would find an alternative placement for that cat or place it up for adoption if it is rehabilitatable to a domestic state. We find a lot of success with that with kittens, if I can get to them before they're 16 weeks old. And so that's an option to place that cat up for adoption instead of the shelter neuter return. If that cat is not at a healthy weight or has any other issues with its health, we would not consider placing it. Also, the policy states that the cat should be 4 months of age. That's also when it's required to be done by, it falls in line with the owned pets, and adopted pets also have to be completed at 4 months of age. If a cat is geriatric or in need of hospice, we would consider placing in a specialized colony so it can be under regular observation. Also, that we have to return within 3 months. So you may say, well, Morgan, why are you keeping a feral cat for 3 months? And the only time we run into that is when we have a nursing mom or a pregnant mom who comes in wild. So if a cat come in and she is obviously pregnant, advanced in her pregnancy, or is nursing a litter, we will keep her for the amount of time necessary to wean those kittens. Our goal is to get her back out of the shelter within 100 days. Through a tremendous amount of research from Austin Animal Center, they've identified that if you keep her more than 100 days, she's going to be dependent on a human food source and can no longer survive in a colony without a human food source. So that is something we strive for and watch that clock for when we do have our feral moms in the nursery, nursing and caring for kittens. So I do want to point out, let's see, I think we've kind of spoken to a lot of this, just that, putting cats back does prevent the influx of new cats into the community. And it does prevent reproducing from those animals when there is sufficient funding in place. I will point out that before I propose this policy to you, I did request a legal opinion from our city attorney, because as I understand it, there are two things that really govern that animals have to be spay-neutered in our community. Number one, state law says any animal adopted from the animal shelter has to be spay-neutered, any domestic pet. So cats and dogs have to be spay-neutered from any government shelter due to state law. And so these cats are not being adopted out. And so that law does not apply to community cats under a shelter neuter return program. The second thing that really governs the spay neuter of community cats is the city ordinance regarding community cat colonies. There's a number of responsibilities listed under that community cat ordinance as it was approved by the council, I believe in 2015. And so one of the things states that any colony caregivers must spay, neuter, and rabies vaccinate their cats. And then it states that animal services must make an attempt to reunite colony caregivers with their cats. We do that by having the cats available on our website with their photograph for 3 days after their day of arrival before spay, neutering, and rabies vaccinating them. And so we do hold those cats just like a stray hold, just like any domestic pet that comes in. But the city doesn't, so the city ordinance does not list that the city's responsibility is to spay, neuter these animals. We do it when there's funding available. We do it because we believe it's the right thing to do, but it is not a requirement or a minimum standard we have to meet. So with that, I am seeking the committee's official motion to action. And of course, I'm available for any questions related to this item.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Is that me?
All in favor?
All in favor? Say aye. All
Aye.
opposed? All right, so I guess we approve, consider the standard operating procedure for returning the community cats to the field.
Yes, thank you for that. And I would be remiss if I didn't announce that any donations are available. Any amount will go towards the care of the cats. And so for any viewers watching in, this is something that we hope to continue fully into fiscal year 20, and we never get into that situation where I'm having to decide to not rabies vaccinate or not spay neuter cats. So donations are welcome and appreciated.
Okay, item number 6, follow-up and administrative issues, discussion and possible action related to 2021 meeting dates.
Thank you for that. I'm going to stop my screen share because in your background, I did propose our 2021 calendar. And so I wanted the committee to have the opportunity to view that and decide how to proceed. We are required by state law to meet 3 times annually. In recent years, we've been meeting at the end of each quarter. But I did want to share that fiscal year 21, I hope, is going to be a really big year for us. It is the year that we are trying to get to 90% and officially become no-kill. And so I did propose meeting more frequently in calendar year 2021 so that I can continue to bring policies and revisions to y'all so that we can continue moving toward that direction. And so in recent years, we've been meeting about 4 times a year. And I did propose increasing that to 6 times a year, including the 3rd Thursdays in January, February, April, June, August, and October. I tried to stay away from March spring break, holidays late in the year. And so those are the dates as I've proposed them, but certainly the committee's calendar is priority to make sure we can honor that. And any special meetings can also be called by the chairman at any time.
We need a
Make a
motion.
motion to adopt the calendar.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Right. We approve the 2021 meeting dates.
Perfect, thank y'all.
All right, item number 7, adjournment. I hereby certify that the above notice of meeting was published on the City of San Angelo's website on the 8th day of October 2020 at 4:18 p.m.
And Kara, could I have a minuted action for that, a motion for the adjournment?
Make
Oh,
a
yes.
motion.
We have a second.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, we're adjourned.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.